Hello chess friends and welcome to Azarov chess channel and welcome to a special game that I wanted to show you today. It's Magnus Carlsen against Alireza Firouzja on leechess.org. So Dr. Nichterstein is playing against Alireza, the chess prodigy on Lee Chess. They played many bullet games. So uh, this is really sort of a saga, this Magnus Carlsen versus Firouzja games, because if you don't know, Alireza won this Banter Blitz Cup against Magnus Carlsen in a shocking game, then lost some games in this Magnus Carlsen Invitation Tournament. But I still think that Magnus has sort of respect to Alireza Firouzja because he plays very often with him again on leeches. And as I was recording the video from yesterday, I recorded this video how Magnus Carlsen won this invitational tournament. Then I played some games on leeches, played like crap. I didn't play great games. Then I watched what's going on leeches, and then I saw that Magnus Carlsen is playing against Alireza. So I followed many of their games and decided to show you a game in which Alireza played with the black pieces. So I wanted to show you the game from black's perspective. Because it meets with the ideas how to play in sort of a Benoni style. It has great instructive elements. Although it was a bullet game, I usually don't cover bullet games, but it was really, I think, an instructive bullet game. It has a great tactical element that, of course, Alireza will use in this game, and be prepared. This is really a wild game. So we have d4 by Dr. Nichterstein, Magnus Carlsen. So we have g6 by Alireza, c4, bishop to g7, knight to f3, c5, going into a Benoni style, which can basically also transpose into a Dragon Sicilian, because if white, for instance, tries something like e4, then we would have maybe after c takes d4, maybe sort of a Moroxy bind. In the game, Magnus played the move d5, passing through with the pawn, and we have now d6. We have really a Benoni style, because now after knight to c3, we have e6, and now e4. It transposes really into a Benoni. So after e takes d5, now it's already a critical moment of the game, because white has basically two choices here. White can take with the pawn, with the c pawn on d5, which will be really the classical variation of the Benoni. But now Magnus plays e takes d5, which opens the e file. That's the most important thing. But when we evaluate this position from this pawn structure, we have here really a symmetrical pawn structure. I'm pointing with this always out because the symmetrical pawn structure has its rules. The rules of symmetrical pawn structures is that probably this game would be favorable for the knight. There is this problem about these pawn structures that white and black could make maybe progress here with some b4 or b5 move, but even when that happens, still this pawns in the center would be static, so the position is a little bit static here. If, for instance, Magnus would have taken this pawn with the c pawn, then the position would be dynamic with ideas to maybe crack the position with the move e5. So it's a huge difference with which pawn you take here. So after e takes d4, e takes d5, pardon me, the position will be static. So one of the positional threats here by Alireza is to play bishop to g4, pinning the knight, and maybe after bishop takes f3, let's just imagine bishop to e2, bishop takes f3, then maybe bishop takes f3. White would continue the game with a very bad bishop, which would be blocked out by some pawn on d5. So I'm telling you this really because I've played this position many times, and I played many times this particular move order. Here, knight to f6, after bishop to d3. One of the ideas of white is now to get this bishop activated. As you can see, if this bishop comes to e2, then this positional threat would really work with the move bishop to g4. So in the game, Alireza castled, and now Magnus played this idea h3. I'm gonna block out your light square bishop because this light square bishop doesn't have good squares, but now you risk this move, which is very natural. And I played this exact same game against a Bulgarian intermaster and demolished him really in this particular opening variation as black. Here rook to e8. What you can do here is, in some occasions, you see that white will go even king to f1. He will not, white will not close the e file with the bishop, but Magnus played bishop to e3, and you can guess what chess prodigy Alireza played here immediately. He played the move rook takes e3. The problem is with the move h3, you have already weakened your pawn structure. So this pawn on h2 is not covering anymore the g3. So now after f takes e3, we have now a new position in which white is of course up the exchange, but there are this dark square weaknesses and also a weak pawn on e3. So these are basically black's targets now, how to attack white's position. It's really an instructive opening line, I think. Although if you put this position in an engine, it will say that maybe white is +1 here, but it's really hard for white here to proceed. You'll see how much problems Magnus Carlsen has also here. Queen to e7 was played, and Magnus simply castles. He wants to invite black to take the pawn on e3, and then maybe go into the simplification line with queen to a2, really simplify the position, because when black trades off the queens of the board, then these dark square problems in front of white's king are not so important, because one of the main ideas now for black here is maybe to build bishop to e5, maybe queen to g3 batteries, and then creating some checkmates on h2. So without the queens on the board, that would be very hard to exploit this dark square weaknesses. So that's why Alireza played this natural move knight to d7. Exactly correct move, I think. Not to take this pawn on e3. This pawn is not a problem. The problem are the dark squares in white's position. So that's why Magnus queen to d2, and now knight to h5. You see how this knight will come and exploit these really weaknesses, followed with the bishop to e5. Still, this is not possible, because this knight is covering this e5, but this knight could jump here and force the trades of knights. Then bishop to e5 would be really dangerous. So that's why here rook to e1 play by Magnus, trying to protect now finally, and now we have a6. Also common idea, because white doesn't have any more the bishop pair, so it means white doesn't have the dark square bishop. So this bishop we could use from the square on e5 to attack the king side, but also attack the queen side with the pawn breakthrough on b5, followed with rook to b8. We would have really some dynamic possibilities here in black's position. So Magnus played the move a4. Maybe here even it's a possibility to play e4, improving the position. But still, if you play this one, then you risk maybe that the knight will jump on f4, and you also risk this bishop to come on a even better square on d4. So it's really hard to battle here, although as I said the evaluation is better for white, but it's really hard to play this position. So I've won, as I said, many games in this particular line. So after the move a4, we have finally this move knight to e5, challenging the knight, which is basically the key protector of white's king. We have bishop to e2, and now knight to g3. You see how Alireza attacks the weaknesses here in white's position. Rook to f2, and now bishop to d7, preparing here this very important b5 pawn breakthrough. But of course, it has to be prepared further with move rook to b8. And here Magnus took knight takes e5. We have bishop takes e5. You see how annoying this knight is, how annoying this bishop is. The queen will come into the game. And the problem, this knight is in this diagonal setup against the bishop. So it means, let's search how this knight could attack the bishop. The bishop is very annoying. I'm not seeing a clear way how he should attack. Knight to d1, maybe knight to f2, maybe knight to d3, but still you have to move the rook somewhere in order to attack the bishop, and even then it's not clear what will happen with this bishop. So I'm not seeing a good way how to counterplay this bishop. Even if you play again this move e4, it doesn't bring you so much, because this bishop on e5 is simply too much, has too much power. So bishop to f3, which Magnus is trying here to stay with the bishop, at least with this bishop on the board, at least to get another defender in front of the king. But when you move the bishop from this diagonal, you're not covering anymore this b5 square. So that's why Alireza played immediately rook to b8 with preparations to finally crack the position on the b file, and then we would have again a new target, the pawn on b2, b3. Finally b5, a takes b, knight takes, bishop takes, c takes b, rook takes b5, and now queen to d3, finally queen to b7. And I just want you now to evaluate the position, and tell me who is better here. Is it white or black? In my opinion, here black has a completely dominant position because still we can always attack with knight to f5 this weakness, maybe threatening to play bishop to g3, grabbing one of these rooks, and still white is proceeding here with his bad bishop, which was our idea, our positional idea in the first place, to get this bishop really bad. Bishop to f3, here after bishop to d1, now rook to b4, played by Alireza. It's really easy to find the best next moves for black in the game. Rook to f3 was played, and now f5, really cementing everything. Never allow white to counterplay now with potential e4. You could maybe give up now finally the rook, but then again with this bishop on g3, again this dark square weaknesses in front of the king are simply too much to handle. Still, we can always play rook to e4, never allow this pawn to advance also. So, and after the move f5, queen to c2 was played, and now h5, simply fixing everything with the idea to even further cement our knight with the move h4. Bishop to e2 was played, and now rook to b3. Believe me or not, in this position, Magnus resigned. So, great tactical game here by Alireza. I just want you to really memorize this particular line. If the e file opens, then after bishop to d3, h3, rook to e8, and now after bishop to e3, it's really a great opening. I would always take this bishop out, even if I don't care what the engine says here. Rook takes e3, f takes e3, and now queen to e7. The idea, that's the most important thing, is not to take this pawn. Don't make that mistake. Don't take this pawn. King to h1 will happen, and then white will open the e file. That's a mistake that you really could make in this particular line. After this particular move, already you saw how much troubles Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, had against the chess prodigy Alireza Firouzja. So, great game. They played really many games yesterday. I just wanted to cover one. It's really, as I said, sort of a Firouzja Carlsen saga. I think they're playing now many times against each other. They respect each other. I think Magnus, as I mentioned, has a huge respect for Alireza Firouzja. Okay, this was a great game. We'll see how Alireza's career will go on. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games so far. There are some games from so many tournaments. Here's the link, and you can also watch my best chess games of all times if you want to see the best chess games that have been ever played in chess history. And you can also watch my commented chess games played by computers with some Alpha Zero, Lila Zero games, and many more. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.